So we're back once again in Deansgrange Cemetery. I've done lots of short videos from here, but I thought I'd do a longer one today and show you some of the famous graves that are here, and also some lesser known people that are buried here from Ireland's revolutionary period. So I'm conscious that there are people around visiting graves, so I'll try and not have them in the shots. But the first grave I want to show you here is one of, where's it gone now? One of Michael Collins' men. So this would be the younger brother of Emmett Dalton, and he was part of Michael Collins' intelligence unit. So he was only 17 when he was working for Collins during the War of Independence, and he would have been involved in the 1916 Easter Rising. He was the younger brother of Emmett Dalton. This is his grave here. So Charles Francis Dalton, Lieutenant, or late Colonel, 2nd Battalion, Dublin Brigade, Old IRA, 1916 to 1922. So he was very young when he was operating with Michael Collins, and he would have definitely worked out of Crow Street in Temple Bar. So him, along with the likes of Pierce Besley, would have drawn up the lists of spies and informers and other men to be executed during Bloody Sunday in 1920. And it's said that he suffered with his mental health. Obviously it wasn't known then what it would have been, but it was his mental health following the War of Independence and what he had done. Now, I read some reports that he had stated he would have nightmares where he could hear the blood of the people that he had been involved in their executions dripping through the floorboards and asking for forgiveness. Now, I read that in a couple of different things, but that could easily be made up. But he definitely did have a medical pension and an IRA pension because of his activities. But he's the lesser known younger brother of Emmett Dalton, who would have been good friends with Michael Collins, and who's buried in Glasnevin Cemetery. But Charles Dalton is buried here. And his a grandson reached out on TikTok to say he'd seen one of the videos. So if you're watching this, I hope I'm doing him a little bit of justice. And yeah, this is a grave. Charles Dalton. So he would have been a member of the Dublin Brigade, but also part of Michael Collins' intelligence unit. And he's buried here in Deansgrange Cemetery. So if anyone's ever looking, it took me ages. I had to use pictures that were online and match them up with the footpath. But he's in St. Anne's section of Deansgrange Cemetery. So this is a massive cemetery, so it can be a little hard to find. There is a Republican plot, but that's for people who would have died in action, and we will take a visit to that in a little while. But we will take a visit or take a walk and see some of the other headstones and graves. So there was one I was looking for in particular, and that's Kathleen Clark's, who was the wife of Thomas Clark and the first female Lord Mayor of Dublin City in the 1930s and 40s, I believe. I couldn't find a picture of her headstone, so I couldn't have nothing to work off. And I have usually asked some of the people working in the graveyard, like the grave diggers and stuff, for help, but I don't see any around today, which is kind of good. Means they're not very busy at the moment. But if I come across it, I will show you. But for now, we'll just have a quick walk through, making our way to some other graves that I know of that might be of interest. So I'm just looking around to see if that. But here's a. So there's a few famous individuals who will be known globally buried here, and we will visit them in a little while. Now we'll take a walk over towards the Republican plot, which will have where is buried the daughter of James Connolly, one of his daughters, I believe it's Nora, and also the men who were involved in the killing of General Henry Wilson in London that just preceded the Irish War of Independence, or the Irish Civil War, sorry. That just preceded the Irish Civil War, and it's believed to have been one of the main catalysts for the British government putting increased pressure on the new Irish Free State to act against the anti-treaty IRA who had taken over the four courts. And both of those men were captured and executed in London, I believe, and then they were later re-interned back in Ireland. And this is their grave here. So, Reginald Dunn and Joseph Sullivan IRA, who died for Ireland on the 10th of August 1922 in Wandsworth Prison, England. So they were executed just a few days or before Michael Collins was killed. So this is the Republican plot. So then it's the same inscription, but in Irish on this side. A little quotation by Patrick Pearse. And then over here you have volunteers from the area Roll of Honour, men who died in the 1916 Easter Rising and the War of Independence, and maybe a few individuals who died during the Irish Civil War. So John Hickey, Patrick Mannion, Francis Power, and back here might see the name and inscription for, I believe it's Nora Connolly. Oh, sorry, Fiona Connolly. Fiona Connolly Edwards, youngest daughter of Commandant General James Connolly, IRA, signatory of the Proclamation of the Irish Republic, 1916, who died 9th of April 1976. And then Joseph Sonny Hudson, 2nd Battalion, Dublin, Number 2 Brigade, Uglagnair, and shot while in active service 10th of August 1922. Died from wounds on the 12th of August. So that was during the Irish Civil War. And a member of the Irish Citizens Army, he served neither King nor Kaiser, his loving daughter and his loving daughter Bernadette. So he died in 1923, which would have, unless it was natural causes, would have also been the Irish Civil War. So there's speculation that Dunn and Sullivan may have been ordered by Michael Collins to actually execute Henry Wilson. But it's unknown if that was the case. But whatever happened, there was increased pressure then put on the Free State Army, and they acted upon that pressure and began the Irish Civil War. But this is just the Republican plot here. It's kind of bigger, but without as many people interned in it as lots of others. The flag really should have the tricolour hanging, but it has been before, but not today. A lot of these Republican graves are actually taken care of by the National Graves Association, which isn't really, I don't think it's related to the government at all. They kind of forget sometimes what they're supposed to be doing. So the National Graves Association takes care of a lot of the Republican plots, and most of them will be related to people who were in the anti-treaty IRA, so they would take care of their graves. If it was people who fought for the Free State Army, a lot of the time they don't maintain those now. I'm not sure if that's still the case. And now we're walking through a little bit of the Protestant part of the graveyard. So you'll see a lot of people from graves from World War I here, because like many of the large cemeteries, these would have originally been, the cemetery would have originally been only for Protestant, and then later changed. So a little unlike Mount Jerome Cemetery, which has big mausoleums and stuff. These are more smaller standard headstones, except this cube one I've seen before. Let's have a quick look, and then we'll go back to the more well-known graveyards or graves. Within this stone rest the ashes of William John Dudgeon. Now, I did a small reel on this gentleman before, but I cannot remember the history behind it. I think he was an architect, like a wealthy architect, hence the big plot he got. So here, in loving memory of the Right Honourable Edward Sullivan, Baronet, Lord Knight Chancellor of Ireland, born July 10th, 1822, died April 13th, 1885. And somebody must still take care of him. But large Celtic cross for this gentleman. And I believe this cemetery, or this church, is a Protestant church. Or it was. I'm not sure if it's still in use. So there's a small one. General Frederick Young, late of the Bengal Army, born November 30th, 1786, and died May 22nd, 1874. And this inscription reads, on the 200th anniversary of the raising of the Sheremore Battalion on the 24th of April 1815 by General Frederick Young, the President and all members of Seymour's Rifles Association, 2nd King Edward VII's own Gurkha Rifles, the Sheremore Rifles, remember with pride the founder of our regiment, 1st of November 2015. So this man may have founded the Gurkhas. I'll have to have a look at that again. Yeah, then a quick Google search, and he founded the first Gurkha regiment to fight for the British Army. So he was a fella born in Ireland, founded the Gurkhas. Now that could be a little not completely accurate, because I'm sure they had regiments before, but that's what a quick Google search says. Anyway, we'll continue on. I'll show you some more headstones and see if we find anything else. See some of the names: Plunkett, Pym, French, Ray. They're not Woodcroft, Woodruff. So not very Irish names. That's a cool headstone. A lot of these would date. These all date. A lot of these date from the 1800s. Some quite sunken in. Okay, continue. We shall continue on. Now I have to retrace my steps. Oh yeah. So I'm just retrace my steps here because we're aiming to find another person that was connected with Michael Collins, and she was a woman by the name of Elizabeth Lily Marnin, and she worked for a secretary within one of the barracks during the War of Independence. I cannot remember her exact position, I think the exact person that she worked for, but it was a fairly high position. And what she would do, she would write up the dispatches for the corporal or the lieutenant, whoever she was working on. I can't remember the exact details, but she would copy them as they were being written and have them sent out to Michael Collins. And some of these dispatches would be getting sent down the country, down to Cork, Tipperary and stuff. And obviously at the time it was trains and buses and the like, so it took a while. But because of the work she done, Michael Collins would sometimes have the dispatches before the officers who were to receive them. So he would sometimes have information ahead of them and be able to warn the IRA members in the area or plan attacks. And she did that for a number of years. I think she was a cousin or a friend of Pierce Paisley, and that's how Michael Collins got in touch with her. And the sad thing about her grave is there's no headstone. So the marking of the grave is known, but there's no headstone. I think I'm just at it now. Yeah, where was it? So it's hard to find, so it's in this area, and it's literally just something like that, which is kind of sad. She wasn't, for the work that she did, there's no marker for her grave. And give me 1 second, I'll find it. Yeah, I just found it. So how I found it is there's a website called Find a Grave, and sometimes there's images people have done where they've visited locations before and taken images. So Lily Marnin, a spy for Michael Collins, is buried here without a headstone, which I think is awful. It's not a mark, not a cross, there's nothing there for her. So she acted as a spy and a secretary, and then after the War of Independence she worked within, I'm going to say within the army, as a secretary, continued her work. Never married, possibly had a child, but there was a little bit of sketchy information on that. And then, passed away and probably didn't have enough money for a headstone. So she would be buried just here, this plot, which is pretty sad. But at least people know where she's buried. Anyway, we shall continue on. Dun, dun, dun. What area was I going to go to? Out this way. Some interesting headstones. There's a very interesting looking one. Yeah, this is one here. I thought this one was always pretty cool. Very well carved and intricate design. This was a Major Edward Harron, 4th Irish Dragoon, who died at Szolnok, which I believe is Crimea, in 1882, like present day Crimea. And then Major Edward Harron. And down this direction So this is Captain James Vaughan, who departed his life 28th of April 1873, and he's a very imposing headstone. I also did a small short on him long time, well, last year sometime, but I thought his was very interesting because it's almost his whole biography here, and very intricate, like with the broken cannon. So you see it at the bottom, and the anchor and sails. And then these probably would have been men that served with him. So we'll continue on. This is a huge family plot for a McGrath family, it seems. And now along this way is probably one of the most famous individuals, if not the most famous individual buried within Deansgrange Cemetery, and that is Dermot Morgan, who is probably better known as Father Ted. Dermot Morgan grew up in Dublin and was an actor, stage actor and TV actor, and I believe some movies for all of his life. But he rose to fame portraying Father Ted on Craggy Island, and he was only 45 years old when he died suddenly of a heart attack over in London, where he lived, and he was cremated, and his ashes were brought back to the family plot in Deansgrange Cemetery. I've done a small video on him before, so I will probably try to include a little more information before you see this section of the video when it comes on. But this is the grave of Dermot Morgan. Brilliant, loving and loved with his little ponies. That's the family plot. So Donica, I believe it's pronounced, Morgan and Ruth. So they would have been his mother, father and sisters, I believe. And then Dermot Morgan himself. So this is a little tricky to find. If there's no one about to help you, the best direction I can give you, if you're coming in from the main entrance, is to go to the right and go to the driveway, and then keep an eye out for these little bushes. He's very close. He's the 6th headstone in. And then you can find Dermot Morgan of Father Ted fame and his 3 little ponies. And just continuing on from, I'll show you actually probably the better way to find his grave would be to come, either use these trees as a marker, and then come up to, once you find this large family plot from the Cairns or the Nissan headstone, then you'll walk in and you'll find Dermot Morgan's grave. But just down close to the same area is a famous political figure, and that is Sean Lemass. Sean Lemass was a member of the IRA during the 1916, or he was involved in the 1916 Easter Rise and was a member of the IRA during the War of Independence. And he served in the government, the Free State government, and Eamon de Valera's government in different capacities before he eventually became Taoiseach himself. And he was probably one of the more progressive Taoiseachs of the time, and helped get Ireland out of its slumber that it had been placed in from the leaders before it. So his grave is just coming up here. There we go, Sean Lemass and Kathleen Lemass, his wife. So, if you're a Taoiseach, you might just end up beside, or you will end up beside everyone else. But he was involved partially with Michael Collins' squad, but mainly with the Dublin Brigade. And his brother there's a lot of controversy around his brother's death. His brother was brought up to the Wicklow Mountains, I believe it was during the Civil War, and executed. And there's a plaque up in the Wicklow Mountains where his brother was killed. And there's always been little mystery surrounding why that occurred. And here then is something that's probably not many people will be visiting these days, but there's a few large, I'll go to it now in a second, there's a few large burial plots for religious orders. So this is the Sisters of Bon Seckers, which has gained some infamy because of what they did. But just to show, and there's a couple of them around. There's other for brothers and for Christian brothers and others. Now we'll continue on, and we'll walk by 1 or 2 more headstones, famous ones. I always found this one interesting also. This is Commandant Peter Paul Galligan. He's a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, involved in the Hawk gun running, fought in the GPO in 1916 Easter Rising, mobilised forces in Wexford, and he was sentenced to death and commuted to penal servitude. In 1917 elected to the Executive Council, 1918 elected to the First Dáil, in 1920 was shot in the War of Independence, and in 1922 resigned from Dáil and all political activity. So this gentleman is a very unknown Republican figure. I don't know much about him, but he was heavily involved in Ireland's fight for freedom. And then obviously in 1922, when the split occurred, he decided that he'd had enough and took himself away from political life. But Commandant Peter Paul Galligan. So there are some interesting facts and people that you can find just by wandering the graveyards, and then just like for how things can be a little different, then you have behind that man who was fighting for Irish independence, you have headstones for, it's just back there now, I'm not sure if you see it, headstones for people who fought in World War One. So having different reasons for taking part. And now we'll head out on our way out, and we'll pass one of Ireland's most beloved singers. And this is the grave of Sinead O'Connor.